The deafening noise of Ocean View Restaurant echoed through the main dining room when Mary Johnson felt her world collapse in slow motion. The tray slipped from her trembling hands, fine china plates flew through the air, and her right foot met with full force the left foot of one of the house's most elegant customers. The scream that Robert Williams let out made the entire salon stop. His hands immediately flew to his injured foot, his face contorting in a grimace of pain that mixed surprise, anger, and a genuine agony that cut Mary's heart like a sharp blade. "Oh, my God!" she exclaimed, dropping the tray she was still holding and immediately kneeling beside the chair where Robert was writhing. "Sir, I'm so sorry. Wait, let me—" "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Robert's voice came through gritted teeth, his blue eyes flashing with pain and indignation. "This foot was operated on just a week ago." The entire restaurant watched the scene with that morbid curiosity typical of those who witness an accident. Mary felt all those dozens of eyes on her, the low murmur of other customers, the weight of humiliation descending on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. And you? What would you do in this situation? Would you run away from the shame or face the consequences of your actions with dignity? Sometimes life puts us in situations where our true nature comes to light, doesn't it? Mary Johnson, at 65, knew well the bitter taste of adversity. Her greying hair was tied in a practical bun, her green eyes shone with a determination that the years couldn't erase, and her calloused hands told the story of a lifetime dedicated to hard work. She had that natural elegance that doesn't come from expensive clothes, but from a dignified posture built through decades of facing storms. "Sir," she said with a firmness in her voice that surprised even herself, "I take full responsibility for what happened. Please let me call a doctor, or at least let me help somehow." "Robert." Williams stopped writhing for a moment and really looked at the woman kneeling beside his chair. He saw, in fact, a simple-looking lady, impeccable uniform despite her age, and in her eyes a sincerity he wasn't used to finding in his world of business and conveniences. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his voice still tense with pain, but with a slightly different tone. "No, sir, but that doesn't change anything. I'm good with injuries, even better with guilt, and I have respect for any person, rich or poor." Something in that response, perhaps the naturalness, perhaps the raw honesty, made Robert hesitate. He was used to flattery, to people bowing before his name and fortune, but this woman treated him simply as a human being who was suffering. "Robert Williams," he said finally, extending his hand. "And you are?" Mary dried her hand on her apron before accepting the greeting. Mary Johnson, nice to meet you, even under the circumstances." The restaurant manager appeared, running, sweating cold, and with an expression of absolute panic. "Mr. Williams, forgive me, please. Mary is new here. She didn't know—" "Carlos." Robert raised his hand, interrupting the rushed apologies from the manager. "Mrs. Mary has already apologized adequately. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to go home and take care of this foot." Mary stood up, smoothing her uniform. "Mr. Robert, once again, my sincere apologies. If you need anything—" "Actually—" Robert paused, leaning on the table to get up. "Would you accompany me to the car? I'm having some difficulty getting around." That's how Mary Johnson found herself walking beside one of the richest men in Miami toward a black Mercedes that gleamed under the parking lot lights. The driver quickly got out to help his boss. "Thank you, John. And thank you, Mrs. Mary." Robert stopped before getting into the car. "Tell me something. Why is a woman your age working as a waitress?" The question was asked without malice, just with genuine curiosity that caught Mary by surprise. "Life sometimes takes us down paths we didn't plan, Mr. Robert. I have a divorced daughter with 2 children to raise, and my nursing assistant pension isn't enough to help as much as I'd like." Robert was silent for a moment, processing this information. "I understand. Good night, Mrs. Mary." He got in the car and left. leaving Mary standing in the parking lot, not quite knowing what to think about that unusual encounter. Robert Williams woke up the next morning with his foot throbbing and a strange feeling in his chest. At 70, he had built a business empire that included everything from construction companies to hotel chains. A widower for 5 years, childless, he lived alone in a 400-square-meter penthouse in Coral Gables that looked more like a museum than a home. His routine was timed like a Swiss watch. Wake up at 5 in the morning, exercise in the private gym, breakfast prepared by the cook, meetings until lunch, more meetings. Until late afternoon, dinner alone while reading financial reports, and sleep at 10 sharp. But that morning, while the masseuse took care of his injured foot, Robert couldn't get Mary out of his head. There was something familiar about her, something that poked at his memory like a song you know but can't remember the name of. "Mr. Robert," said Martha, his cook for 15 years, "you barely touched breakfast. Are you feeling well?" "I'm fine, Martha. Just thoughtful. If you're enjoying this so far, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment saying what you would do in their place. Maybe your comment will inspire the next chapter." During the first meeting of the day with the construction company directors, Robert found himself paying more attention to the people around the table than to the numbers on the screen. When had he actually stopped to really look at the people he worked with? Charles Silver, his financial director, noticed the distraction. "Mr. Robert, would you like to postpone this meeting? With yesterday's accident—" "What accident?" asked Patricia, the marketing director. Robert realized he had thought of the incident with Mary as an accident, not as the irritating inconvenience it should have been. It was just a misunderstanding at the restaurant, nothing major. But it was something, yes, something that bothered him in a way he couldn't explain. That afternoon, making a decision he himself found strange, Robert instructed John, his driver, to take him back to Ocean View. "Are you sure, Mr. Robert? You said you didn't want to go back there after what happened." "I changed my mind, John." The restaurant was calmer during the late lunch hour. Robert chose a discreet table and ordered just coffee, but his eyes scanned the room, looking for Mary's figure. She appeared after a few minutes, carrying a tray more carefully than usual. When she saw Robert, she stopped, as if she had been shocked. "Mr. Robert, how's your foot?" "Better, thank you. Would you mind sitting with me for a moment?" Mary looked around, nervous. I'm working, sir. I'll talk to Carlos." A few minutes later, Mary was sitting across from Robert, nervously fidgeting with her apron. It was the first time in a long time that she had been so close to a man in a situation that wasn't professional. "Mrs. Mary," Robert began, "may I ask a personal question?" "Yes, sir." "Have we met before? Before the day before yesterday, I mean." Mary was quiet for a moment, studying his face. The well-cut grey hair, the blue eyes that seemed gentler in daylight, the upright posture, even sitting. There was something familiar. "Yes, but I don't know if you remember," she said finally. "But a long time ago, when I was young, I was friends with your sister, Claire Williams." Robert's expression changed completely. "Claire. My sister Claire. You're the Mary who used to frequent your house, yes. I was about 17, Claire." 18. That was over 40 years ago." Robert leaned back in his chair, astonished. The memories came back like an avalanche. A big house in Coral Gables, his sister's birthday party, a green-eyed girl who laughed loudly and wasn't intimidated by the arrogant way he, at 25, cultivated at the time. "My God, Mary. You're Claire's Mary. And you're the cocky little brother who was always scowling at your sister's friends." Both laughed, and it was as if 40 years had been erased in a laugh. "How is Claire?" asked Mary. "Complicated as always," Robert sighed. "She married an Italian, lives in Milan. We have little contact. And you? Did you marry? Have children?" "I married, became a widow, had a daughter. Life took its course." Mary paused. And you? I know you married, but I've been a widower for 5 years. We had no children. Robert looked out the window. Sometimes I think life passed me by without me noticing. There was a melancholy in his voice that touched Mary deeply. Mr. Robert, please just call me Robert. After all, you've already seen me throwing a tantrum over a hurt foot. This brought a smile to Mary's face. All right, Robert. But tell me, what brought you back here? It wasn't just to have coffee, was it? Robert hesitated. How to explain that he had woken up thinking about her, that something in her simplicity and honesty had stirred feelings he thought had been dead for a long time? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe curiosity, maybe nostalgia. Maybe... He stopped, searching for the right words. Maybe because it's been a long time since someone treated me like a common human being, instead of like Robert Williams, the businessman. Mary studied him carefully. She saw a successful man, obviously used to having everything he wanted, but she also saw loneliness in his eyes, a loneliness she knew well. Robert, she said softly, can I say something without you taking offense? Of course. Have you always been this bitter? Because I remember a young man who, despite being cocky, had a smile that lit up the room when something really made him happy. The observation hit Robert like a punch to the stomach. When was the last time he had really smiled? When was the last time something had made him genuinely happy? I think I got lost along the way, he admitted, his voice low. We all get lost. But sometimes life gives us a second chance to find ourselves. They remained silent for a few minutes, each lost in thought. Finally, Robert looked at his watch. I have to go. I have a meeting. He stood up carefully, favoring his injured foot. Mary, can I come back tomorrow? To talk more? Mary smiled, a smile that made Robert's heart race. Of course. But next time, eat something. You can't live on just coffee. I promise. And that's how a ritual began. Every day, in the middle of the afternoon, Robert appeared at Ocean View, ordered something simple to eat, and talked with Mary during her breaks. A week had passed since Robert began his daily visits to the restaurant. At first, the other employees speculated about the millionaire businessman's interest in the 60-something waitress, but they soon realized there was something genuine in those conversations. Mary had gotten used to looking for the familiar face in the crowd during her shifts. Robert always chose the same corner table, always ordered simple dishes that she suspected he didn't really want, and always stayed until she had a few free minutes to talk. That Thursday, it was pouring rain when Robert arrived at the restaurant. His expensive clothes were soaked, his hair disheveled, and he was limping slightly. His foot still bothered him on humid days. My God, Robert! Mary approached with a towel. You're soaked! What happened to John? I dismissed him for today. I wanted to drive myself. Robert gratefully accepted the towel. How long has it been since you drove in the rain? About 3 years, since I sold my car to help with my daughter's expenses. Robert stopped drying himself. You don't have a car? I don't need one. I live nearby. I come by bus or walking. It's more economical. At that moment, Robert realized how different their realities were. He had 3 cars in the garage and a driver at his disposal, while Mary depended on public transportation. And how are you getting home today with this rain? I'll manage. It's not the first, nor will it be the last time. No way. I'm taking you home. Mary hesitated. Robert, you don't need to. I do. It's the least I can do for a friend. The word friend hung in the air between them. Was that what they were? Friends. Robert wasn't sure. He only knew that conversations with Mary were the best part of his days. Robert's car was a black, silent BMW that contrasted with everything Mary knew. She gave the address, a simple apartment in Homestead, and remained silent for most of the trip. Mary, said Robert when they stopped at a traffic light on US 1. Can I ask an indiscreet question? You can. Do you regret it? Any choice you made in life? The question caught Mary by surprise. She looked out the window, watching people running from the rain. I don't know if regret is the right word. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had studied more, if I had tried other professions. But then I look at my daughter, my grandchildren, and I know that every choice brought me to them. And you? Do you regret anything? Robert thought for a moment. I regret not stopping to live. I spent my whole life working, accumulating money, building companies. But for what? To die alone in an empty house. The light turned green, but Robert remained stopped until the car behind honked. Sorry, he murmured, continuing to drive. Robert, you're not alone. You have friends, employees who like you. I have acquaintances and people who depend on my money. It's different. You have people who really care about you. I do, and now you do too. The simplicity of Mary's statement made Robert's heart race. When was the last time someone said they cared about him without having ulterior motives? They arrived at Mary's building, a simple 5-story building with peeling paint. Robert parked in front and looked out the window. This is where you live. This is where I live, Mary confirmed, without any shame in her voice. It's not a palace, but it's home. Can I... Robert hesitated. Can I come up? I'd like to see your home. Mary looked at him surprised. Robert, are you sure? It's a simple apartment, no luxury. Mary, do you think I care about luxury now? 5 minutes later, Robert was sitting on Mary's small living room sofa, holding a cup of drip coffee and looking around with fascination. The apartment had 2 small bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, living room and bathroom. But it had something his 400-square-meter penthouse didn't have. Soul. The walls were covered with family photos. There were plants in every corner, and the smell of homemade cake came from the kitchen. My daughter Carol lives here with me and the boys, Mary explained, pointing to photos of 2 blonde, blue-eyed children. She works in a clothing store. It's hard to cover all expenses alone. And the boys? Peter is 12. Johnny is 8. They're my passion. Mary's eyes shone when she talked about her grandchildren. Smart, clever, full of dreams. Peter wants to be a doctor. Johnny wants to be a football player. Robert observed the photos carefully. He saw 2 smiling children, resembling Mary in the eyes, embracing a young woman with blonde hair and green eyes. They seem like happy children. They are. Even with all the difficulties, we try to give them lots of love. Love! Robert repeated the word, as if it were foreign. Sometimes I think I forgot what that is. Mary put down her cup and moved closer to him on the sofa. Robert, can I say something? Even risking our friendship? You can. You're punishing yourself for something. I don't know why, but it's like you've decided you don't deserve to be happy. The words hit Robert like a punch. He felt his eyes burn and had to fight against tears. My wife, he said in a hoarse voice. Beatrice, she died of cancer. During the 2 years of treatment, I continued working, as if nothing was happening. I said I needed to keep the companies running, that she would understand. Actually, I was afraid of seeing her wasting away, afraid of not being able to save her with all my money. When she died, I was in a meeting in New York. Mary held his hand, feeling it tremble. Robert, she died alone, Mary. The woman who shared her life with me for 20 years died alone because I was too cowardly to be there. The tears that Robert had been suppressing for 5 years finally came out. Mary hugged him, letting him cry on her shoulder, feeling that powerful man fall apart in her arms. You can't blame yourself. Forever, she whispered, stroking his grey hair. Beatrice knew you loved her. Did she? Because I never told her that as often as I should have. The people we love know, Robert. Even when we don't say it, they know. They stayed like that for a long time, Robert crying years of repressed pain and Mary offering the silent comfort of her presence. When he finally calmed down, Mary pulled away and gently dried his tears with a tissue. "Thank you," he murmured, embarrassed by the vulnerability. "For what?" "For letting me be human. What would you do if you saw someone who always seemed strong and invincible falling apart before you? Would you be able to offer your shoulder without judgment, opening your heart to embrace another person's pain?" That night, Mary lay in bed, thinking about the fragility she had seen in Robert. Behind all that wealth and power, she had found a deeply lonely and hurt man, carrying guilt that didn't belong to him. Robert, for his part, drove home in silence, feeling lighter than he had felt in years. For the first time since Beatrice's death, he had cried. He had let someone see his wounds. And, most surprisingly, the world hadn't collapsed. The following days brought a subtle but noticeable change in the dynamic between Robert and Mary. After the night he opened up about Beatrice, their conversations at the restaurant acquired an intimacy that scared and enchanted both at the same time. Robert began arriving earlier and staying later, inventing excuses to prolong his stay at Ocean View. Mary, for her part, found herself fixing her hair in the bathroom mirror before her shift, choosing more carefully the discreet lipstick she wore. But not everything was rosy in this budding romance. The differences between their worlds began to become more apparent each day. On Tuesday, Mary casually mentioned that she was worried about Peter's school tuition, which had increased and further compromised the family budget. Robert, without thinking, twice offered to pay not only the boys' school, but also a private one for Johnny. "Robert," Mary said firmly, "I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept." "Why not? It would be easy for me, and you're sacrificing yourself." "Exactly why. I don't want you to solve my problems with money. That's not how it works." Robert was confused. In his world, money solved everything. It was his way of showing affection and resolving issues. But Mary saw things completely differently. "I don't understand," he admitted. "If I can help, you already help me. Your company, your conversations, your friendship, that has a value that no money can buy." It was their first small fight, resolved with Mary patiently explaining that she would accept his help in other ways, but not financially, at least not yet. On Thursday, it was Robert's turn to face resistance from his own circle. Claire, his sister, called from Milan with an urgency he hadn't heard in her voice in years. "Robert, what's this story I'm being told?" "What story, Claire?" "About you getting involved with a waitress. Roberto Cavalcanti called me saying you've been frequenting popular restaurants and talking with an older woman. Is this true?" Robert felt irritation growing in his chest. "And if it is, Robert, you're 70 years old. You've been a widower for only 5 years. You're one of the most influential men in Miami. You can't afford to—" "To what, Claire? To be happy?" A tense silence followed from the other side of the line. "Robert, I'm not saying you can't be happy, but think about your position, your name. People will talk. Let them talk. What if she's only interested in your money?" This question hit Robert like a stab. Not because he thought Mary had ulterior motives. She had refused even his help for the children, but because it showed how his own family saw him, as a walking checkbook incapable of inspiring genuine love. "Claire, do you remember Mary? Your friend from when you were 17. "Mary? Mary Johnson? Of course I remember. She was a sweet girl, but— Wait, are you telling me that it's her, the same Mary?" Claire's tone changed completely. "My God, Robert. Mary from my adolescence. How is she?" Robert briefly told about the reunion, about the conversations, about how Mary had become important to him. Claire listened in silence. "Robert," she said finally, "if it's really the Mary I knew, then maybe you've found something real." But the pressures didn't come only from family. Robert's partners began questioning his absences from meetings, his lack of focus on business. "Robert," said Charles Silver during a board meeting, "you've been different lately. More distracted. Is everything okay?" Everything's great, Charles. Maybe better than it's been in a long time. It's just that the third quarter numbers need your full attention, and the numbers never needed my full attention, Charles. You're perfectly capable of running the business. Actually, I'm thinking about reducing my active participation in the company. The room fell silent. Robert Williams talking about stepping back from business. It was like the sun had decided to rise in the west. "Mr. Robert," Patricia intervened, "are you well? Wouldn't it be better to think this through more carefully?" "I'm great, Patricia, and I've already thought a lot. I spent 40 years of this company being my life. Maybe it's time for life to be bigger than the company." Mary, for her part, faced resistance at home. Carol, her daughter, had noticed changes in her mother's mood. "Mum, you've been different lately, more cheerful." "It's because I'm happy, daughter." "Does it have anything to do with this man you've been mentioning, Robert?" Mary hesitated. How to explain to her daughter that she was, at 65, falling in love again? "Carol, I know it might seem strange." "Mom, tell me everything. Who is he?" Mary told about the reunion with Robert, about their conversations, about how he made her heart race like it hadn't in decades. Carol listened with growing attention. "Mum, this Robert, is he Robert Williams, the businessman?" "Yes, but, Mum, do you realize who this man is? He's a millionaire. How do you—" "Carol," Mary interrupted firmly, "he's Robert, a lonely, kind man who lost his way and is trying to find himself again. His money is what matters least." "But, Mum, you're from different worlds." "We're different people, daughter. That's what matters." Carol was apprehensive. What if someone was taking advantage of her mother? What if it was just a rich man's whim? The tension peaked on a Friday when Robert decided to have dinner at the restaurant and invited Mary to sit with him when her shift ended. "Robert," she said quietly, "I don't think it's a good idea. People are noticing, commenting." "So what? Let them comment. It's easy for you to say. You don't depend on what others think to keep your job." Robert was silent, once again realizing how different their worlds were. For him, others' opinions were irrelevant. He had enough power to be above gossip. But Mary was vulnerable, depended on her work, on her colleagues' respect. "You're right," he admitted. "Sorry, I didn't think about that. You don't need to apologize. You just need to understand that our situation is complicated." "Mary," Robert held her hand under the table, "do you think we're wasting our time? That all this is an illusion?" She looked into his blue eyes, seeing there the insecurity, the fear of being ridiculous, the vulnerability he rarely showed to the world. "Robert," she said softly, "it's not an illusion. What I feel for you is real, but we need to be realistic about the obstacles. Then let's face them together." At that moment, Mary knew she was hopelessly in love with that complicated and wonderful man, and she was afraid, very afraid. The storm that had been forming for weeks finally broke on a rainy Tuesday in November. Robert had arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual, clearly agitated, and asked to speak with Mary privately. "Did something happen?" she asked, noticing the tension in his face. "My sister arrived from Milan yesterday. She wants to meet you." Mary felt her stomach turn. "Robert, I don't know if—" "Mary, I want you to meet my family. I want them to see how special you are. What if they don't approve? If they think I'm not good enough for you?" Robert held her hands. "Then that's their problem, not ours." This conversation was interrupted when Carlos, the manager, approached nervously. "Mrs. Mary, there's a lady asking for you. Says she's the sister of someone you know." Mary and Robert exchanged glances. Claire had come to the restaurant. Claire Williams Bianchi was sitting at a discreet corner table, observing everything with sharp eyes. At 68, she maintained the elegance Robert remembered from her youth, but had acquired a hardness that only time and disappointments bring. "Mary," she stood up when she saw them approaching. "My God, how different you look. More mature, obviously, but still beautiful. The two women hugged with the hesitation of those who reunite after 4 decades. "Claire, what a surprise to see you. Robert told me about you two." Claire went straight to the point, her gaze alternating between Mary and her brother. "I must say I was surprised." Claire's tone indicated that surprised wasn't exactly the word she would choose. Robert noticed the tension. "Claire, why don't the 3 of us have dinner so you can talk calmly?" "Actually," Claire said, "I'd like to talk with Mary alone first, if she doesn't mind." Mary felt as if she were being examined under a microscope, but nodded. "Of course." Robert hesitated. "Claire." "It'll be fine, Robert," Mary reassured him. "I'll finish my shift and we'll talk." An hour later, Mary was sitting across from Claire in a nearby coffee shop, feeling strangely like a teenager being questioned by her boyfriend's parents. "Mary," Claire began after ordering an espresso, "I'll be direct because I respect our past friendship. Do you realize what you're doing?" "Regarding what?" "My brother. Robert is a vulnerable man right now. He never fully recovered from Beatrice's death." Mary stayed calm. "I know about his vulnerability, Claire. Maybe even better than you do. That's what worries me." Claire leaned forward. "Mary, I remember you as a sweet and genuine girl. I don't want to believe you're taking advantage of my brother's emotional state." The accusation hit Mary like a slap. "Claire, how can you think that of me?" "Because I've seen it happen before. Rich and lonely men are easy targets for women who—" "Stop!" Mary slammed her hand on the table, making some people look. "Claire, I work as a waitress because I need to, not because I'm hunting for a rich husband. If I wanted to take advantage of Robert, do you think I would have refused when he offered to pay for my grandchildren's school?" Claire blinked in surprise. "He offered that. He did. And I refused. Because what I feel for your brother has nothing to do with money." "Then what is it? What does a woman like you want with Robert?" The question was asked with blatant cruelty that made Mary straighten in her chair. "A woman like me," Mary repeated, her voice dangerously calm. "What exactly does that mean, Claire?" Claire seemed to realize she had crossed a line. "Mary, I didn't mean—" "You did. You meant that a 65-year-old waitress doesn't have the right to fall in love with your millionaire brother. That I should know my place, right?" "It's not that. It's exactly that, Claire. And you know what? You're right about one thing. I am different from Robert. I know the value of money because I've been in need. I know the value of family because I've fought to keep mine together. I know the value of love because I've lost people I loved." Mary stood up, taking her purse. "And maybe that's exactly why your brother needs me. Not for me to take advantage of him, but to remind him that he's a human being, not a bank account." "Mary, wait." "No, Claire, you've made your opinion clear. Now I'll make mine clear. If Robert decides he doesn't want to see me anymore, I'll respect that. But if it's because of pressure from you or society, he'll regret it for the rest of his life. Just like you'll regret having driven away the only real chance of happiness he has." Mary left the coffee shop, leaving Claire in shock. She walked home in the rain, crying tears of anger and humiliation. Meanwhile, Robert waited anxiously at the restaurant. When Claire returned alone, 2 hours later, he immediately realized something had gone wrong. "Where's Mary?" "Robert, we need to talk." "Claire, what did you do?" "I protected you, as I always have." Robert felt his blood boil. "Protected from what?" "From the only person who makes me happy." Claire told her version of the conversation, painting Mary as a gold-digging woman who was taking advantage of his vulnerability. But as she spoke, she saw Robert's expression becoming increasingly cold. "Claire," he said when she finished, "you made a terrible mistake. Robert, Mary is the most honest woman I've ever met. She works as a waitress to help her daughter and grandchildren, refuses my money because she has pride, and loves me not despite who I am, but exactly for who I am." Robert, you're confusing gratitude with love. No! Robert slammed his fist on the table. I'm confusing love with love. For the first time in 5 years, I feel something real, and you come here to destroy it? I just thought. You thought like you always think. With prejudice, with arrogance, without considering that maybe, I'm capable of making my own decisions. Robert stood up, grabbing his car keys. I'm going after Mary. Robert, don't do something stupid, The only stupid thing I did was let you all dictate my life for so long. But when Robert arrived at Mary's apartment, Carol answered at the lobby with a hostile expression. She doesn't want to talk to you. Please, I need to explain. You need to leave my mother alone. She came home crying because of the humiliation your sister put her through. Carol, I didn't know Claire would do that. Please, just let me go up. No. My mother has suffered enough. You rich people think you can play with people's lives. I'm not playing. I love your mother. The declaration came out of Robert like a scream, echoing in the small lobby of the building. It was the first time he had said those words aloud, including to himself. Carol was surprised by the intensity of his emotion. Mr. Robert, I love your mother, Carol, and she loves me too. Don't let others' prejudices destroy this. Carol studied him for a moment, seeing a man clearly desperate, vulnerable, very different from the image she had of a cold and calculating businessman. She's not receiving anyone today, but tomorrow maybe. Robert nodded. Thank you. He spent the night awake, walking around the apartment, rehearsing what he would say to Mary, how he would explain that he had nothing to do with Claire's attitude. Mary also spent the night sleepless, questioning whether she hadn't deluded herself, whether she really had the right to dream of love at 65. And you? Have you ever faced prejudice from people you loved because of your choices? Have you ever had to decide between others' approval and your own happiness? The truth is that sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who limit us most, trying to protect us from pain that might not even exist. The next day dawned cloudy, heavy with omens. Mary woke up with swollen eyes from crying so much and a decision made. She was going to talk to Robert one last time to end that situation once and for all. She arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual, with her heart heavy. Carlos immediately noticed something was wrong. Mrs. Mary, are you okay? I am, Carlos, just a little tired. But she wasn't okay. The conversation with Claire had awakened all her fears and insecurities. Who was she to think she could have a relationship with a man like Robert? The differences between them weren't just social, they were abysmal. Robert arrived at his usual time, but was clearly tense, with deep, dark circles and clothes less impeccable than usual. When he saw Mary, his eyes lit up with relief. Mary, we need to talk. I think so too, Robert. They sat at their usual table, but the atmosphere was completely different. There was a formality in the air that hadn't existed before. Mary, about yesterday, about my sister. Robert, she interrupted him, maybe your sister is right. Mean? Mary took a deep breath, gathering strength to say the words she had rehearsed all night. Maybe we're deluding ourselves. We're from very different worlds, Robert. You have responsibilities, a social position, a reputation to maintain. And I'm just a 65-year-old waitress with financial problems and a family to support. Mary, I can't believe you're saying this. I'm being realistic. What happened yesterday made me see this clearly. Your family will never accept me. Your friends will never accept me. And eventually you'll also realize it was a mistake. Robert felt as if the ground was opening beneath his feet. Mary, you can't believe that. I can, and I do. Robert, these days with you have been wonderful. You made me feel young again, made me remember what it's like to be desired, loved. But dreams have to end sometime. This isn't a dream. Mary, what I feel for you is real. I know it is. And I love you too, Robert. I love you so much it hurts. But sometimes loving means letting go. Tears began to stream down Mary's face, and Robert felt his heart breaking. "Mary, please." "Robert, you're a wonderful man. You deserve to be happy. But your happiness can't come at the cost of your family, your position, your world. Hey, you're still there, right? You've gotten involved with the story, but haven't liked, commented, or subscribed yet? Let's do this. If this story touched your heart in some way, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment what you felt. That makes all the difference for us to keep creating moments like this. My world is where you are. Robert's passionate declaration made several people in the restaurant. Look at them. Mary noticed and felt even more embarrassed. See, we can't even have a private conversation without becoming a spectacle. How do you think it would be if we tried to have a real relationship? Robert looked around, seeing the curious looks, the discreet whispers. For the first time, he really understood the pressure Mary felt. "Mary, give me a chance. Give me a chance to prove this can work." "Robert, you're one of the most powerful men in this city. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. But I have to live in this world, work in this world, and after what happened yesterday, I don't know if I can." She stood up, taking her purse. "Robert, it was beautiful while it lasted, but some stories don't have happy endings." "Mary, don't do this. Don't let Claire win." Mary stopped, looking at him one last time. "It's not about your sister winning or losing, Robert. It's about accepting reality." She moved away, but Robert caught up with her at the door. "Mary, he said, gently holding her arm, "if you really love me, as you say you do, then give me a week to show that this can work." "Robert, 1 week, Mary. If at the end of it you still think we're wasting our time, I'll respect your decision and never bother you again." Mary looked into those blue eyes she loved so much, seeing in them a determination she had never seen before. 1 week, she agreed, "but I don't want you to humiliate yourself for my sake. Mary, for the first time in my life, I'm fighting for something I really want. It's not humiliation, it's dignity." In the week that followed, Robert showed a side that surprised even Mary. Instead of continuing to visit the restaurant, he completely changed his approach. On Monday, he appeared at the restaurant not as a customer but as a volunteer. He had talked to Carlos about helping in the kitchen during lunch hours. "Mr. Robert," said Carlos, nervous, "this isn't necessary." "It's not necessary, but it's what I want to do." Robert spent the afternoon helping in the kitchen, washing dishes, peeling vegetables, learning from the cooks. Mary watched from afar, shocked to see that powerful man with an apron, his hands dirty, genuinely smiling while helping with simple tasks. "Mrs. Mary," whispered one of the waitresses, "who is this man? He's helping for free, treating everyone as equals." On Tuesday, Robert brought Miguel Santos, one of the city's most renowned chefs, to give a free cooking class to the restaurant staff. But he didn't just observe. He actively participated, making mistakes in recipes, laughing at his own errors, showing a humility no one expected. On Wednesday, he arrived by bus. He had left his car at home and used public transportation for the first time in decades to better understand Mary's reality. "Robert, what are you doing?" Mary asked when she saw him getting off the bus. "Getting to know your world," he said simply. "How can I truly love you if I don't understand your life?" During this week, Robert also talked extensively with Carol and met Peter and Johnny. To everyone's surprise, especially Carol's, he showed genuine interest in the children, asking about their dreams, listening to their stories, playing with them in the small courtyard of the building. "Mom," said Peter after one of these visits, "Uncle Robert is cool. He doesn't talk to me like I'm a child, you know?" Johnny, more observant despite his younger age, added, "And he makes Grandma laugh. It's been a long time since Grandma laughed like that." Carol began to see Robert with different eyes, not as the millionaire businessman she had imagined, but as a man who genuinely cared about her family. On Thursday, Robert did something that shocked his entire social circle. He appeared at a high society charity event with Mary as his companion. Mary had initially resisted. "Robert, I don't have clothes for this. I don't know how to behave. Do you want to go shopping with me? Tomorrow morning we can choose an outfit together. Robert, you can't spend money on me. Mary, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And besides, I want to show you off to these people. I want them to see the incredible woman you are." On the night of the event, Mary looked beautiful in a simple but elegant navy blue dress that Robert had insisted on buying. She was nervous, gripping his arm tightly as they entered the ballroom. "Robert, I don't know if I can. Just be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted." Their entrance caused an immediate stir in the ballroom. Robert Williams, known for his years of solitary widowhood, accompanied by a woman who clearly didn't belong to that world. Claire was there and immediately approached, with an expression that mixed shock and anger. "Robert, what are you doing?" "I'm introducing the woman I love to everyone I consider important," he said calmly, but loud enough for several people to hear. Mary felt all eyes on her, heard the whispers, the poorly disguised comments. But Robert stayed by her side, proudly introducing her to every person who approached. "This is Mary," he would say, "the woman who reminds me every day that there's life beyond business." Some people were polite but distant. Others were openly rude, but to Mary's surprise, some people were genuinely warm and interested. "Mary," said an elegant lady of approximately 60, "Robert told us you're a nursing assistant. What important work. My husband is a doctor and always says that nurses are the true heart of hospitals." During dinner, Robert held Mary's hand under the table, feeling her tension, offering his strength. "You're doing wonderfully," he whispered. "Robert, everyone is looking. Let them look. You're the most beautiful woman in this room tonight, inside and out." At the end of the night, as they were leaving, Claire approached again. "Robert, we need to talk." "Claire, anything you have to say can be said in front of Mary." Claire looked at Mary, then back at Robert. "Robert, I owe an apology to both of you." Mary seemed surprised, but Robert's expression remained neutral. "Claire?" "Mary, I was unfair yesterday. I was protecting my brother from pain that maybe doesn't even exist. Robert, I haven't seen you so alive, so happy in years." Claire looked directly at Mary. "Mary, I remember you as a sweet girl. I can see you've become a remarkable woman. If you can make my stubborn brother happy, then you have my blessing." Mary felt tears welling up. "Claire, and I apologize for the things I said. They weren't fair to you." Robert smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thank you, Claire." On Friday, the last day of their week, Robert took Mary to the cemetery where Beatrice was buried. "Robert, you don't need to. I want to. I need to." They stood before the simple marble headstone while Robert spoke for the first time about his wife, with someone who truly understood. "Loss. Beatrice would have liked you," he said finally. "She always told me I was too serious, too focused on work. She would have said you were exactly what I needed." Mary squeezed his hand. "Robert, I'm not trying to replace. You're not replacing anyone, Mary. You're filling a space that was empty before I met you." That night, Mary sat in her small apartment with the decision weighing on her heart. Yes, 1 week had shown that Robert was willing to fight for them, willing to build bridges between their worlds. Carol sat beside her on the sofa. "Mum, what are you thinking?" "I don't know, daughter. Part of me thinks it's impossible, but another part—" "Mum, I've watched you this week. I've seen how he looks at you, how you look at him. And I've seen how he is with Peter and Johnny, how he treats our family with respect." Mary looked at her daughter. "And I think you deserve to be happy. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone. Maybe it's time for someone to take care of you." On Saturday morning, Mary didn't go to work. Instead, she dressed carefully and went to Robert's building. The doorman, who had been instructed during the week, let her up without questions. Robert opened the door in casual clothes, his hair dishevelled, looking like he hadn't slept. "Mary." "Robert, I've made a decision." His face tensed. "And?" She approached, raising her hand to touch his face. "I've decided that I love you, and that loving means taking risks. It means believing that maybe, just maybe, we can make this work." Robert felt his knees weaken with relief. "Mary, but I have conditions." "Any?" "I keep working. I need my independence, my dignity. This has to be a partnership, not a rescue." "Agreed. And we go slowly. I want to be sure this is true for both of us." "Agreed. And if your world never really accepts me—" Robert put his finger to her lips. "My world is where you are, Mary. Everything else is just details." He kissed her then, soft and tender, a kiss that tasted of new beginnings and second chances. "Robert." "Yes?" "I love you." "I love you too, Mary, more than I thought possible." The small church in Coconut Grove was filled with an interesting mix of people. On one side sat Robert's business partners and high society friends, many still adjusting to the idea of their colleagues' unusual romance. On the other side were Mary's family, neighbours and restaurant co-workers. Peter and Johnny, now 13 and 9, were part of the wedding party, proud to be giving away their beloved grandmother to the man who had become like a grandfather to them. Mary, at 66, was radiant in a simple cream dress. She had refused Robert's offer to buy an expensive dress, choosing something modest but elegant that felt authentic to who she was. Robert, at 71, looked younger than he had in years. Marriage suited him well, or rather, Mary suited him well. "Do you take Mary as your wife?" asked the priest. "I do," said Robert, clearly his voice echoing throughout the church. "And do you take Robert as your husband?" Mary looked into those blue eyes that had captured her heart. "I do." Claire, serving as Mary's matron of honor, smiled through tears. She hadn't just grown to accept Mary, she had learned to love her like the sister she never had. After the ceremony, the reception was held in the courtyard of Mary's apartment building. It was Robert's idea. He wanted the celebration to be in Mary's world, surrounded by people who had known and loved her long before he appeared. Roberto Cavalcanti, Robert's oldest friend, approached him during the party. "Robert, I have to admit, when I first heard about this, I thought you had lost your mind." "And now?" Roberto watched Mary serving wedding cake to elderly neighbors, making sure everyone felt included. "Now I see that maybe you found it. Roberto, for the first time in my life, I understand what real happiness is." When the night was ending, Robert and Mary stood on the small balcony of their apartment, looking at the city lights. "Any regrets?" asked Robert. Mary smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes forming from joy. "None. And you?" "Only that I didn't find you sooner." "Robert, we found each other at exactly the right time, when we were ready to appreciate what we have." Robert nodded, knowing she was right. If they had met 10 years earlier, he would have been too focused on business. If they had met 10 years later, maybe they wouldn't have had the energy for the challenges they overcame. "Mary, what do you want to do now?" She laughed, the sound filling the night air. Now, I want to dance with my husband in our living room, with music too loud for the neighbors." "I think that can be arranged." 2 years later, Robert sold his business interests, and they opened a small cafe next to Ocean View Restaurant. It was Mary's dream finally realized. A place where she could cook, serve people, and Robert could manage the business side while learning to interact with people as individuals instead of clients. The cafe, called Mary's Kitchen, became known in the neighborhood not just for the food, but for the human warmth. Robert could often be found there in the evenings, helping serve meals to elderly customers who couldn't pay full price, many of whom reminded him of Mary when they first met. "You know," Mary said to him one night as they closed the cafe together, I think you've become who you were always meant to be. And who's that? A man who leads with his heart. Robert looked around the small cafe, so different from the corporate boardrooms where he had spent 40 years of his life, much smaller than the restaurant empire he had built. But it felt more his than anything he had ever owned. Mary? Yes, love? Thank you. For what? For seeing the man I could become when I had forgotten he existed. She kissed him gently, tasting satisfaction on his lips. 5 years later, when Peter graduated as valedictorian of his high school class, he gave a speech about overcoming stereotypes and prejudices. He told the story of his grandmother and her husband, how love had triumphed over expectations, how courage had conquered fear. My grandmother taught me, he said in conclusion of his speech, that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as problems. Sometimes what seems like an end is actually a beginning. And sometimes the people who seem most different from us are exactly who we need. Robert and Mary sat in the audience holding hands, watching the boy, who had become like their own grandson, speak words that perfectly captured their journey together. Proud, whispered Robert. Very proud, Mary whispered back. Of him, of us, of everything we built together. After the ceremony, as they walked to the car, Mary noticed Robert slightly favoring his left foot, the same foot she had stepped on 5 years earlier. Does it still hurt? Sometimes. On rainy days, she smiled. I'm sorry. Again. Don't be, said Robert, stopping to face her. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. And you? Do you believe that sometimes our worst moments can lead to our best lives? That love can overcome any social barrier when it's real and when two people are willing to fight for it, and that sometimes, at any age, it's never too late for a second chance at happiness. As they drove home through the city where they had found each other, Mary and Robert knew their story wasn't just about second chances. It was about first chances too. The first chance Robert had taken to be vulnerable. The first chance Mary had taken to believe she deserved love. The first time either of them had chosen happiness over convention. Some stories end with happily ever after, but theirs continued with happily during difficult times, during celebrations, during the ordinary moments that make up a life shared with someone who sees you, really sees you, and chooses to love you anyway. Their love story had begun with broken porcelain and ended with a solid foundation. And if you asked them today what their secret was, they would say, sometimes you have to step on someone's foot to find the path to their heart.